Hey everyone, welcome to another Deep Dives. I love to dig into these research papers, and today we're looking at one that I think is going to resonate with a lot of you. Um, it's a Spanish research paper, and it really dives into this whole social media mental health connection.
Oh yeah, this one's fascinating.
It is.
Yeah.
I was really sucked in.
It's called The Impact of Social Networks on Mental Health, with the subtitle of Bibliographic Review.
Okay, so right away I'm thinking, okay, they've done their homework. They've looked at a lot of different sources, right?
Exactly. It's a comprehensive overview. And what I found really interesting is that they zeroed in on Spain as kind of their case study.
Hmm.
Why Spain? Well, it turns out that social media use in Spain is particularly high, especially among young people.
Oh, really?
We're talking like 90% of 16 to 24-year-olds are active on platforms like Facebook and Instagram.
Wow, 90%. That's a huge chunk of that population.
It's massive. So it provides a really interesting lens for understanding how social media is impacting mental health in a culture where it's so deeply ingrained.
I mean, that's got to be like almost everyone in that age group.
Pretty much, yeah.
Wow. Okay. So before we get into like all the heavy stuff, right? Because I know there's a lot of concern around social media and mental health, but the researchers, they didn't just focus on the negative. They also acknowledged some of the potential benefits, right?
Absolutely. They highlight how social media can facilitate connections with like-minded people.
Right. Like finding your tribe.
Exactly. Building communities, even accessing important health information.
Yeah, I've definitely used social media to connect with support groups and find resources that have been really helpful.
And there's a lot of power in that, right? Being able to connect with people who understand what you're going through or to find reliable information that can help you on your journey.
Absolutely. Okay, so we've got the good stuff, the connections, the information, but I think it's time to address the elephant in the room. Let's talk about some of the mental health concerns this research highlights.
Right. Getting to the nitty-gritty.
Yeah.
Well, one of the most striking findings is the strong correlation between increased social media use and issues like anxiety and depression.
Yeah, I feel like that's something a lot of us can relate to on some level, right?
For sure. I mean, think about it. We're constantly bombarded with these curated images of people seemingly living their best lives.
Oh, yeah, the highlight reel.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Vacation photos, career wins, perfectly filtered selfies. It creates this pressure to present a flawless online persona.
And when your real life doesn't quite match up to that curated perfection.
Anxiety can definitely kick it.
Totally. It's like this constant low-grade fear of missing out,
Yeah.
mixed with this pressure to keep up appearances.
Yeah, and then you add in the constant notifications, the likes, the comments. It's like this dopamine hit that keeps you coming back for more.
It's almost like a recipe for addiction.
It can be, and
Yeah.
that's one of the things that researchers are really concerned about, especially when it comes to young people whose brains are still developing.
Right. Their impulse control and ability to regulate emotions is still maturing.
Exactly. They're particularly vulnerable to this addictive pull of social media.
And it's not just anxiety, right? The research also points to a strong link between social media use and depression.
Especially on platforms like Instagram that are so image-focused.
So it's not social media in general, but certain types of platforms that seem to be especially problematic.
That's what the research suggests, yeah.
And it makes sense if you think about it, right?
It does. I mean, Instagram is all about visuals. People are constantly comparing themselves to these idealized images.
Right, and it's so easy to get caught up in those comparisons, especially when you're already feeling down or insecure.
It can really fuel those feelings of inadequacy and hopelessness, which are classic symptoms of depression.
So it's like this vicious cycle, right? You feel bad, so you scroll for distraction or to try to feel better.
But then the content you're consuming actually makes you feel worse.
And you get stuck in this loop.
Exactly. It's a slippery slope.
Okay, so we've talked about anxiety, we've talked about depression. This is all pretty heavy stuff, but I want to dig a little deeper into something you mentioned earlier about the particular vulnerability of young people.
Oh, yeah. That's a key takeaway from this research.
Because it's not just about the content itself, right? It's about the developmental stage that they're in.
Absolutely. Adolescence and young adulthood are crucial periods for developing a sense of self, for figuring out who you are and where you fit in.
And social media can really complicate that process.
It can amplify those feelings of inadequacy and insecurity that are already so common during those years.
It's like they're bombarded with these unattainable beauty standards and lifestyles. It's no wonder their self-esteem takes a hit.
Yeah, and remember, their brains are still developing. They're more susceptible to peer pressure and social influence.
So they're kind of hit with this perfect storm of vulnerability.
You could say that, yeah.
Okay, so we're talking about anxiety, depression, self-esteem issues, potential addiction. It paints a pretty bleak picture.
It's definitely a concern, but the good news is that awareness is the first step toward change.
Right. Knowledge is power.
Exactly. The more we understand about how social media affects our minds and bodies, the better equipped we are to make healthier choices for ourselves and for the young people in our lives.
Absolutely. And that's where I think the role of healthcare professionals, particularly nurses, becomes so important.
I completely agree. Nurses are on the front lines. They're interacting with people of all ages and backgrounds. They're in a unique position to spot the signs of social media-related stress and to offer guidance and support.
It's like having a digital health advocate right there with you.
Exactly.
Someone who understands the potential risks and can help you navigate this complex landscape.
And they can play a vital role in educating people about the risks, promoting healthy online habits, and connecting them with resources if needed.
It's like bridging the gap between the digital world and mental well-being.
That's a great way to put it.
But it's not just about addressing the negatives, right? We also need to explore how social media can be used for good, for support and connection, especially when it comes to mental health.
Absolutely. And that's where things get really exciting because while there are definite risks, there's also tremendous potential for using these platforms to create positive change.
Okay, I'm hooked. Let's dive into that in part 2 of our deep dive.
Welcome back to our deep dive. In part 1, we talked about how social media can be this double-edged sword, right?
Yeah, it's like this constant tension between the good and the bad.
Exactly. And we explored some of the darker sides of that equation, like the potential for addiction and the negative impacts on mental health.
Right, the anxiety, the
Right.
depression, the self-esteem issues.
All of that. But, it's not all doom and gloom.
No, definitely not.
Yeah.
I'm really excited to explore the flip side of that coin.
Mm.
How can we actually use social media for good when it comes to mental health?
That's the million-dollar question, right?
It is, because I think there is a lot of potential there. But it's about being smart and intentional about how we use these platforms.
Exactly. It's about being savvy users, being aware of the potential pitfalls, but also recognizing the opportunities.
So where do we even begin? Like, what are some practical steps we can take to kind of reclaim our power over social media?
Well, I think awareness is a huge piece of the puzzle. Understanding how these platforms are designed to keep us hooked.
Right, they're engineered to capture our attention.
Exactly. They use algorithms and persuasive techniques to tap into our deepest desires for connection and validation.
It's like they're playing on our basic human needs.
Yeah, they're very good at it. And that's why it's so important to kind of pull back the curtain and see how the wizard works.
I love that analogy, the wizard behind the curtain, because once you understand the mechanics of it, the emotional pull of those likes and notifications, it starts to lose its power a little bit.
It does. It's like demystifying the process.
Yeah, and I think that's a huge step towards being able to use social media more consciously.
It is. It's about recognizing those triggers, those patterns that keep us scrolling, and then making a conscious choice to step away or to engage differently.
So it's not necessarily about quitting social media altogether.
Not at all. It's about finding a healthy balance.
Right, because there are definitely benefits to be had.
Absolutely, there are. I mean, think about the power of online communities.
Yeah, people can connect with others who share similar interests or experiences.
Right. Find support groups, access valuable information.
It's like tapping into this global network of shared wisdom and support.
Exactly. And that can be incredibly empowering, especially for people who might feel isolated or marginalized in their offline lives.
So it's about being intentional about how we use social media, choosing to focus on the connections and the resources that actually support our well-being.
Exactly. And being mindful of the content that we're consuming, is it making us feel good? Is it inspiring us? Or is it just adding to our stress and anxiety?
Yeah, that's a great question to ask ourselves before we start scrolling.
It is. It's like checking in with our digital diet.
I love that our digital diet, because just like with food, we need to be mindful of what we're feeding our minds.
Absolutely. And just like there are healthy foods and not so healthy foods, there's healthy content and content that might not be so good for our mental well-being.
And I think it's important to remember that what's healthy for one person might not be healthy for another.
That's a great point. We all have different sensitivities, different triggers, different things that make us feel good or bad.
So it's about finding what works for you, what supports your individual needs, and being willing to experiment and adjust as you go.
Exactly. It's a process of self-discovery.
It's like figuring out your own personal social media recipe.
I love that your social media recipe.
Right? Like, what are the ingredients that nourish you, that make you feel good? And what are the ingredients that you might want to limit or avoid altogether?
And just like with cooking, you might need to tweak the recipe a few times to get it just right.
That's such a great analogy.
It is. It's about finding what works for you and being kind to yourself along the way.
So we've talked about awareness. We've talked about being intentional. We've talked about finding a healthy balance. What are some other practical tips that people can implement in their daily lives?
Well, one thing that's really helpful is setting boundaries. Deciding how much time you want to spend on social media each day and sticking to it.
It's like creating a budget for your attention.
Exactly. You can also set limits on specific apps, disable notifications, or even designate certain times of day as device-free zones.
Those are all great ideas.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of the device-free zones, especially in the hour or two before bed.
Me too. It makes such a difference for sleep quality.
It really does, because when we're constantly exposed to that blue light from our devices, it can interfere with our natural sleep patterns.
And sleep is so crucial for mental health.
It is. It's like the foundation of everything.
Yeah, it is. So if you're struggling with anxiety or depression or any other mental health challenge, making sure you're getting enough sleep is absolutely essential.
Okay, so we've talked about setting boundaries. We've talked about prioritizing sleep. What about the idea of a social media detox?
I think detoxes can be incredibly beneficial. Taking a break from social media, even for a day or two, can give your mind a chance to reset.
It's like hitting the refresh button.
Exactly. And it can help you gain some perspective on your relationship with these platforms. Are they serving you or are they starting to control you?
And it doesn't have to be this all or nothing thing, right? You can choose to limit your use to certain platforms or only engage with content that brings you joy and inspiration.
Exactly. It's about finding what feels good for you, what supports your well-being.
So it's about customization, finding what works for you, and being willing to adjust as needed.
That's right. It's a journey, not a destination.
This has been so helpful.
Yeah.
I feel like we're really starting to reclaim our power over social media instead of letting it control us.
That's the goal. And, it's not always easy.
No, it's not.
These platforms are designed to be addictive. They're designed to keep us engaged.
But we're not powerless.
We're not. We have a choice. We have a voice.
And the more we understand about how these platforms work, the more empowered we become.
Exactly. It's about knowledge. It's about awareness. It's about taking back control.
Before we wrap up this part, I want to circle back to something we touched on earlier about the impact of social media on body image.
Oh, yeah, that's such an important topic, especially when we're talking about young people.
Because they're so vulnerable to those unrealistic beauty standards that are so prevalent online.
They are, and it can really take a toll on their self-esteem.
So what can we do as parents, as educators, as a society to help young people navigate this minefield of images and messages?
Well, I think open and honest conversations are crucial. Creating safe spaces where young people feel comfortable talking about their experiences on social media.
Right, letting them know that it's okay to struggle with these issues.
Exactly, and validating their feelings. Helping them understand that what they see online is often a very distorted version of reality.
That's like reminding them that the highlight reel is not the whole story.
And it's not just about talking. It's also about modeling healthy media consumption habits ourselves. If we're constantly comparing ourselves to others online or prioritizing our online persona over real-life interactions, they're going to pick up on that.
Right. Actions speak louder than words.
Exactly. So we need to be mindful of the messages we're sending, both implicitly and explicitly.
It's like leading by example, showing them that real life is much richer and more fulfilling than the carefully curated highlight reels they see on social media.
And another important piece of this puzzle is media literacy education, teaching young people how to critically evaluate the images and messages they encounter online.
Right, to recognize Photoshop and filters and understand the motives behind the content they're consuming.
Exactly. It's like giving them a decoder ring, helping them see through the smoke and mirrors.
I love that analogy because it's about empowering them to think critically, to question what they see, and to develop a healthy sense of skepticism.
And that's such an important skill to have in today's world.
It is, because we're bombarded with information from all sides.
We are, and we need to be able to sift through it all and discern what's real, what's trustworthy, what's actually serving us.
So it's not about shielding young people from social media altogether.
No, it's about giving them the tools they need to navigate it safely and responsibly.
To be conscious creators of their own digital lives.
Exactly. And, we can't put all the responsibility on parents and educators. Social media platforms themselves have a role to play.
Right? They need to be held accountable for the content they promote and the algorithms they use.
Absolutely. There's a growing movement to demand greater transparency from these companies, to push for ethical design practices that prioritize user well-being, and to advocate for stricter regulations that protect vulnerable users, especially children and adolescents.
It's about demanding that these platforms take responsibility for the impact they have on our lives, both individually and collectively.
And it's about recognizing that we as users have a voice and a choice.
We can choose to support platforms that align with our values, to demand change from those that don't, and to use our voices to advocate for a more ethical and humane digital landscape.
We have more power than we realize.
And on that note, we'll wrap up part 2 of our deep dive into social media's impact on mental health. Stay tuned for part 3, where we'll explore even more strategies for cultivating a healthy and fulfilling relationship with the digital world. All right, so we're back for the final part of our deep dive, and I've got to say my brain is buzzing.
I know, right? We've covered so much ground.
We've talked about the dark side of social media, the anxiety, the depression, the addictive nature of it all.
Yeah, it's a lot to process.
It is, but, I'm feeling cautiously optimistic.
Me too. I think there's a lot of hope here.
Yeah, because we're not powerless, right?
Mm-hmm.
We have the ability to change our habits,
Mm-hmm.
to set boundaries, to use these platforms more intentionally.
And that's what this final part is all about, How can we actually leverage social media for good when it comes to mental health?
Because it's not all bad, right?
Yeah. No, it's not.
There is a flip side to this coin.
There's a whole other dimension to social media that can actually be really supportive and empowering.
I'm really excited to dive into that.
Me too.
Because I've heard so many stories of people finding real, genuine connection and support online.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, think about the power of online communities.
Yeah, people connecting with others who share similar interests or experiences.
Right, finding support groups, accessing valuable information.
And having this global network of shared wisdom and understanding at your fingertips.
It is, and it can be a lifeline for people who feel isolated or alone.
Especially for those who might be struggling with mental health challenges.
Absolutely, because these online spaces, they can break down barriers of isolation and stigma.
Right. They create this sense of belonging, this sense of shared experience that can be incredibly healing.
It's like finding a virtual support group that's available 24/7.
Wow. Yeah, that's so powerful. And it's not just about peer support, right?
Mm-hmm.
You can also access a wealth of information about mental health online.
Oh, yeah. Tons of resources, articles, videos, even connect with therapists.
Oh, wow. So you can actually find therapists online.
Absolutely. Yeah. Telehealth and online therapy have really taken off in recent years.
That's amazing because it makes mental health care so much more accessible.
It does. You can literally connect with a therapist from the comfort of your own home.
Wow. That's a game changer.
It is. And social media can play a crucial role in connecting people with these services.
So it's like a bridge to professional care.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've got online communities, we've got access to information, we've got telehealth and online therapy. What else is out there?
Well, social media has also been a game changer when it comes to mental health advocacy.
Oh, yeah. I've seen so many people sharing their stories, raising awareness about mental health issues.
It's incredible, right?
It's like this collective awakening, this global conversation about mental health that's happening in real time.
And it's giving a voice to those who've been traditionally marginalized and silenced.
It's so empowering to see people coming together to challenge stigma and advocate for change.
It really is.
Okay, so we've talked about all these amazing benefits, but I think it's important to add a little caveat here.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Social media is not a replacement for professional help.
Absolutely not.
It can be a valuable supplement, a way to connect and find support, but it's not a substitute for therapy or medication or other evidence-based treatments.
Exactly. And think of it this way. Social media can be a bridge to professional care.
Right.
A way to connect with resources and find information, but it's not the destination itself.
I love that analogy, the bridge to care, because it's so important to remember that if you're struggling with a mental health condition, it's crucial to seek professional guidance.
Absolutely. Don't try to go it alone.
Right. There's help available, and social media can actually help you find that help.
Yeah. It can point you in the right direction.
So it's about using these platforms wisely and remembering that they're just one part of the equation.
And I think that brings us back to something we've talked about throughout this entire deep dive, the importance of balance.
Oh, yeah. Balance is key.
It is. It's about finding that sweet spot where we can harness the benefits of social media without sacrificing our mental health.
Our relationships, our connection to the offline world.
Exactly. It's about remembering that social media is just one part of our lives, not the whole story.
And I think that's a really hopeful message to end on.
I agree.
Because it means we have the power to choose how we engage with these platforms.
To shape our online experiences.
To advocate for a digital world that supports our well-being.
We're not just passive consumers, we're active participants.
And that's incredibly empowering.
It is. It's about being conscious creators of our digital lives.
Using these platforms in a way that aligns with our values and supports our mental health.
That's the ultimate goal.
So as we dive back into the digital world, let's remember to be mindful, to seek balance, and to use our voices to advocate for a more supportive and inclusive online space for everyone.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
That's a wrap on our deep dive into social media and its impact on mental health.
We hope you found this exploration insightful and empowering.
And maybe even a little bit hopeful, because remember, you are not alone.
There are resources available, communities to connect with professionals to support you on your journey.
Until next time, scroll mindfully and take care of your mental health, both online and offline.